Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with their randomly designed and separately created story elements. We combine them together to make something you can listen to over and over and over again. I am, of course, Levi.
And I'm Reed.
Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Well, we are continuing on our story from last week. I think I called it Children of the Gods, which was kind of the thing. Was partly thematic for the story. But let's see, what's a good recap? So basically,
I just listened to it. I can recap it real quick.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so the world was created by a single deity entity, and he gave his creation, the kind of predominant life form that he created, power and dominion over creation. So they could, individually call down rain, stop rain, kind of be kind of the kings and gods, as you would say, of their own little corner of the world. However, as things would go, as it became more and more populous, like people naturally do, they turned their power or their authority over to a more central unit, like a king or a council, who then ultimately a king of some sort. And so when they did such, they the individuals started losing their power to kind of have power and dominion over, creation, because they've turned it over to an individual. Over time, these individuals set themselves up as basically god kings, or ultimately like members of a pantheon kind of god system, where followers of, like, as everybody's familiar with, like Zeus, they would follow and they'd worship at the temple of Zeus. Well, in this case, it's like they're all the head of a kingdom. So most everybody, it's like if you worship Zeus, you live in Zeus's kingdom. If you worship Hermes, you live in Hermes' kingdom. If you worship Artemis, you live in kind of Artemis's kingdom. And so that's kind of the hierarchy of that. In doing so, the people have given up their longer lifespans for shorter ones, and the line of people that have been given power over to them have set up like where basically they keep their longer, and in fact an even longer lifespan, being that they kind of hold all the power, and then they grant it or give it into like the ability to use it as well to their heirs, or like people inside of their family that are kind of close-knit tied, and they become kind of like the priest, and so now all these people that are kind of have a connection to that main god king are kind of the priests who hold power or given power through the head figure. And then what you have is our villain, Artemis. He's one of these, I guess you could say, higher echelons that really kind of takes people under his wing, and basically is a sly character that kind of takes people's power for himself. And he originally had the anti-hero as his right-hand man, and was kind of feeding him information on how to process a material, because his end goal was to kill the other god kings in the pantheon in order to gain power. Having been disillusioned, our anti-hero Thomas has split away, but has continued to make this material, because now he, having been his eyes open to the realization that all these people are just sly kind of family tied hierarchy of kind of snakes and despots, he has it in mind to kill what he would say is the gods, because he views them as nothing more than greedy men who have gained power. And in doing so, this material that he has been able to process is a special material that can hide or detract some of these powers that the gods have, or hide things from them. And so he's making himself a suit of armor out of it. And in the process of making this, I think you said it was an ounce, to process down an ounce of this material in the alchemy chemical makeup and process to make it, produces like 25 pounds of gold per ounce of this material. So it's made him extremely wealthy. And so he's turned that into making educational centers, hospitals, things that kind of are trying to help turn people from this kind of pantheon god power structure to, learning the sciences of nature. And that is that. So he's on his way trying to create enough of this so that he can kind of rid the world of these gods, or then eventually, hopefully, turn the minds of people through the sciences.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward as far as you think that's pretty good?
Yeah, I thought it was very good.
Great. So we'll add on to that today. What story elements did you guys have?
I have prophecy.
I have wise old woman.
I have Ka-Tet members. So do you want to go first then, Reed, I think, probably?
Yeah, mine's pretty straightforward. straightforward. And it actually, there was an excavation going on where under Thomas's direction, he was seeking materials, and there was they found there was a slab, a flat hewn stone, and it had an engraving on it.
Yeah.
And the words were a little bit cryptic. It says, "An artifact will be found, which is the key to restoration of balance in creation. Each man, each woman will regain the power to assert dominion and take responsibility for their rightful place."
That's not cryptic at all. That's like really straightforward.
Yeah, but what is this artifact?
Right.
If this
I
is an
suppose.
artifact they found, there's now another artifact that they are seeking.
Yeah, maybe it is is it talking about itself?
Who knows?
This artifact, an artifact will be found. It's this one. That's good. I have this kind of idea that maybe the church as a whole has kind of not let the average human being know that that's a thing. You know, the church. When I say the church, I just mean like the priests and things of the pantheon and the religion that's kind of been created around their authority. So that's cool. Should I go next or do you want to go next, Seth?
I'll go ahead and go next. It kind of goes along with Reed's a little bit. I'll
Okay.
try to make it quick. So the wise old woman is, and I think it plays into the artifact. She's one of many, but they're hard to find and they kind of keep to themselves. And it seems like you can't find them if you're looking for them. But if you're truly seeking something that they have, then they seem to find you. And that is like a secret old ancient order of kind of hermit shepherd priests that worship the creator god, the god that has no direct kingdom. And it's all very kind of secret and cryptic because of course it would usurp the seeming authority of all the other set up gods.
Yeah.
And so, but it's not like they're like trying to make anything of themselves. It's just kind of a quiet sect that, like, let's say like in Thomas's sake, I think this will play out later, where then he obviously has left. He's been disingenuine. He's seen the light of kind of what these god kings are. And so and many times people kind of come to that conclusion, because they're always seeking, oh, well, maybe, Artemis is stronger than Zeus, or Zeus is stronger than Hermes, and Hermes is, greater than Thor. Well, it all just kind of depends on your view of them. And you kind of find out eventually if you're truly seeking, something bigger and better to put your trust in. Because I think anyways, I'll get the wise old woman and I'll set this other part up. So the wise old woman, kind of to throw this back, is Deborah. And she's kind of a old prophetess of this kind of old sect. And she is seeking out Thomas, actually, I would say maybe she's trying to find, because she's getting older and she's seeking out someone to take her place. But then inside of that is sidetracked to now find Thomas, who has come to her attention, that has obviously left the structure and is kind of seeking him out to gain, not necessarily like gain access and be like, oh, this is how it is, but just kind of like interplace herself and kind of help guide him along to kind of realize that these, like he already knows, these aren't truly gods. There's something bigger and greater than them. And what she and many other people like her do is they actually help return people not to have that power themselves, but to give up, because everyone has already given up that power, but to return the power over their own fate and their own destiny to themselves by their own actions. Whereas where right now in this system, if you want rain for your crops, well, then you have to offer to the god, and if he's satisfied with what you want, you have to constantly appease to that system, to do pretty much everything and be in favor with either one of the higher priests or people of the system. And what these prophets of the creator god kind of bring people back around to is that to cast off the power that these people hold, to regain it for themselves, but not necessarily that and then they can cast these things, but simply the idea that rain will come. All they must do is till the ground, do what is charitable and right, and the rain will come in its season. And according to their own choices, they can shape their own thing, not in some kind of fancy magical way that all of this has become, but just the freedom of the idea that it's in their hands and their choices to do right and wrong, to bring about their own thing. And that's what these people, and particularly Deborah, has done, is basically finding these people, because when these people truly seek, they become aware of it, and then they find these individuals and and lead them out of the pantheon, more or less.
Cool. So you want to hear about the Ka-Tet members?
Yeah.
Yes.
Reed, this stone, how big is it? Is it just like a tablet, or are we talking
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, it's not somebody that one guy can lift it, but it's not something that one guy could carry around.
Right. Okay. And so if Thomas's people were the one who found it, then is it in control of the bad guys? Or is this something where he's kind of keeping himself?
Well, he has found it, but he's in control of it. He found it, and word of it. I don't know how that's playing out.
Right.
Yeah, but it hasn't fallen into the hands of somebody who wants to suppress it right now.
Gotcha. So the Ka-Tet members are a set of triplets. One is called eyes, one is called ears, and one is called lips. One's blind, one's dumb, and one's deaf. No one's quite sure which one's blind. For a long time, people thought it was Eyes that was blind because his name's Eyes. But then he commented about how something was really beautiful. It's not something that they share or talk about really, or regard as like a thing. And in truth and reality, they sort of are connected together in kind of like a telepathic way. And in order to, the price they pay for that connection is they kind of share these disabilities. So they always have to, each of them always has to have one, and they have to be willing to give up one. You have to be willing to switch. But they kind of play the operation of like street urchins or beggars, but they're information gatherers. They deal a lot in giving information to the authorities, maybe to Thomas, maybe to whoever wants to pay them. They aren't cut purses, as it were, but they sort of deal on the fringes of society, watching people, being observed, not being observed. So in that same way, when one of them is blind, their hearing, increases significantly. When one of them is deaf, blind, one can't hear, one can't see, and one can't speak. That's deaf and dumb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it mute? Which one's mute?
Well, dumb would be mute.
Mute and
Okay.
dumb.
Dumb is like it was probably a term that's out of favor, but
Okay.
that's
Well, I
the
don't
way
mean for it to
was
be out
when
of
I was
favor.
a
I'm
kid.
just saying one can't see, one can't speak, and one can't hear.
And that these disabilities can transfer.
Yeah.
So the one guy will be sitting like in a spot presumed blind, but he will be hearing everything. And then, much to the chagrin of the people that have just dismissed the blind beggar, all of a sudden he can see everything like
Okay,
with
or
an
maybe
eagle's eye.
actually, now that I think about it, maybe it's more so they can send the other things to each other.
Yeah.
So the blind guy can never see, but his two brothers can send images and pictures to him so that if asked later, he can describe what someone looks like. Kind of, because he's never been able to see. So he can't really describe what they look like. He can kind of describe what they look like. And the same thing with the not being able to speak, he can send his thoughts and his intentions to one of his other brothers, and his brother can say it. Same thing with not being able to hear,
Cool.
So they just kind of operate in sort of a ghetto area of like a sort of a slum area of this town or this city where Thomas's main operation is. And their biggest issues are, keeping orphans off the streets, staying alive themselves, not letting anyone know what they can do. Absolutely not letting anyone know, because they have a fourth sibling, and that fourth sibling was sort of taken away by the people, the man, as it were, and for a while they got like terrible sensations back, but then it stopped 15 years ago, and so they are on the hide. But they're the kind of people who are really willing to, they would say they are unwilling, but when push comes to shove, they're ready to ride the winds of Ka. Maybe one of them isn't as willing as the other two, but typically if two of them are willing to do something, then the other one just kind of has to get in line at that point. So if they feel like the need to do something, or if something is happening, then they're going to be involved, in some way, whether as informants or as in some other form of information gathering or something. They'll be involved in some way. So I'd say as the first time Thomas ever used them was when he was moving. After he moved the stone from its space where it was found into his home house laboratory kind of area, he got their help, basically paid them to check and see if anyone else had like taken notice of them. And so they went on kind of like a campaign of observation for like, 2 weeks to kind of look around the area and make small talk with people and sort of see if anyone had heard about it. And they came back and said, no, you were in the clear. Like all of your, efforts to hide and obfuscate what you were doing were successful. So that's the Ka-Tet.
Cool.
I think so.
Well, we know so because that's what you said it was. That was your element.
Yeah, my words become reality. Such is the effect of writing a story.
You say, therefore it is.
Right. So the villain hasn't stopped his kind of efforts to make it seem like he's freeing people, but really bring people under his dominion.
Right.
And I had an idea with that earlier too.
Okay.
So I think something that sets Artemis aside, kind of given his character, because he is, I think in the Greek pantheon, Artemis was kind of important, if my memory serves me right. But the kind of what he's doing is he's setting himself up, and maybe some people don't really realize that he is one of, the gods. And maybe perhaps, years ago he had fell out of favor amongst many people. And so most people had forgotten about him. And he kind of came back and rebranded himself as kind of this guy who had power and could, as like more of like a priest figure rather than a king figure, and would kind of like help set people up in their own, like kind of like, oh, you tired of, having to follow Zeus, and almost like setting up kind of the old way of thing where he would give kind of people power under him in kind of a sneaky way where they didn't realize that it was him giving them the power. And so he was kind of able to, sucker a lot of, let's say, lower echelon, priests and people, I say priests, but like the people that were kind of like the lower tier of people that were related and had or were given power. And so basically then got them to give their rights back over to him for the guise of having their own kind of sub kingdom set up. And so he kind of has like maybe what looks more like a republic where maybe they don't know it, but he's got like 100 smaller kingdoms set up under himself where most people all kind of consolidate supreme power for themselves. But so he's kind of suckered all these people with like the idea of being their own king with power rather than having to subserviate themselves to this other god figure. Kind of what I'm almost thinking like where he had like all the Greek city states where they were all Greece, but they were all kind of their own thing. But let's pretend that they all didn't go to that pantheon, but they kind of imagined that they themselves were kind of the rulers of their own, small kingdom with power. But again, it was just kind of like a collection of city states underneath of, Artemis, who would kind of, play the priestly, wise mentor role of all these kings that they'd all unbeknownstly basically reset him back up as that head of that corner of the pantheon with power.
Right. What's the villain's goal? Do you just want to be big boy again?
Yeah,
he wants to be big boy.
Consolidating power.
And I know in the last episode, his original plan was to kill off the other, just like Thomas, and I think that's why they coordinated, or why Thomas kind of was on the kick that he was, because that is originally what Artemis was having him do, was create this stuff because Artemis wanted to kill off kind of these opposing forces. Because if he already fell from kind of grace and power once, it could happen again. And so if he kills off everybody else and kind of slowly builds his own kingdom back under himself, the more power he gains and the less there's one less person to share power with. And if he can eliminate them all, then he can basically be the ultimate god of this world.
Interesting. Okay. So I think what we want to see, how the catalyst for things becoming mixed up is twofold. One, we have the story starts where Thomas is still working with Artemis, but he's like pretty much completely divorced from the idea. He's like pretty much done, but he's still doing it because he kind of feels like he owes it a little bit, right? And then Thomas gets a message about the stone and the rough draft of what it says, and it kind of confirms his idea and his belief, because Artemis has been pushing this idea that yes, people need to have a authority, but what they need to do is they need to trust in me to deal out that authority. That's how it used to be, right? And he has a lot of people convinced that that's how it used to be, is that you'd all choose one person and they would hold that power, and then you would, it would be dealt out from them. And then Thomas got heard the prophecy, realized that this is not the case, and basically, you know how sometimes you convince yourself you're like doing a stupid thing or a foolish thing, and you know it's foolish, but you sort of convince yourself that it's okay, and then all it takes is like one small thing, and then your entire brain is like, okay, there it is, I'm convinced, time to trying to make a 180 degree shift and do something else.
And I think the key is when he connects up with Deborah.
Yeah, maybe he comes. I kind of have this picture of where he kind of comes home in kind of an irritated mess. It mentions how he gives a coin or something to a blind man sitting out in front of his house, right? And he comes into his house and he kind of throws his things down and he, lights a candle or a torch, and it kind of illuminates this huge stone tablet, and he kind of sits there and is just looking at it, and then he hears someone shifting or someone say something, and then that's Deborah, who has made her way into his house without him knowing or anyone knowing, in order to talk to him or entreat him or whatever.
Yeah, and she tells him of the sages, these old hermits that have kept alive the old story of the true creator, and how he didn't and never intended people to be ruled by these petty gods.
Right.
Yeah, and that like jacks him up, because he was kind of like, he never had bought into the pantheon as it had developed.
Yeah, exactly. And at first he's really resistant to the idea, even though you can tell from his when you first meet him in his previous actions that he's also resistant to the idea of the pantheon and their ultimate power kind of schemes. He has to be really careful, because you can't just come out and say that you don't think that the pantheon are real, or that you think that maybe they're just men who are hyped up on power or whatever.
So, how old is Thomas? Does he have a family? Does he have?
I'm gonna say probably like late 30s, early 40s, and no, but I wouldn't, I just kind of viewed him as his own person, and not really, maybe kind of a thing where he's come up from, farmer family or maybe not farmer family, but like poor family, not affluent, but he showed enough interesting kind of outlooks or scientific understanding that he was chosen by people to learn things, and has kind of had to fight his way into any kind of recognition his whole life. That's what I was thinking, but I'd be willing to have that not be the case.
Well, that works.
Yeah,
we kind of need him to be kind of in the prime of life, because he's taking a lot of action.
Yeah. Why, Seth? What were you thinking?
No, that's fine. I like what you laid out. Is fine. Yeah.
So what exactly does Deborah tell him, though? Like, does she just like give him the whole spiel?
Yeah, like the powers are real. They've just been perverted.
No, I understand that. I understand what she tells him. I'm just saying, what flavor does she tell him? Does she say, you're doing what's wrong, or you're on the right path, or I need your help, or here, let me tell you a history, or whatever,
So that was the reason that I was curious about if he'd have a family, because I was thinking if there was some other, let's say, family member, because I don't think that she'd come out right away, but if she had had befriended his daughter, and so his daughter would come home and be like, oh yeah, this old beggar lady or whatever, like this shepherd had been out in the field here and have been talking to her, and I don't know, like as if maybe he's been disillusioned with this, and so he's brought his daughter up so far, kind of subtly, he's been disillusioned, but kind of brought her up with kind of standards or morals based on these things not being real, or kind of in the direction basically he has. So she, not that he knows entirely, but he just knows that it's not true, and so it's kind of it's like a secret hush hush, where it's we do these things, this is the society we live in, but this is obviously not right. And so it's brought her up in kind of already giving her a hint of it, but as far as he can really see. And so she meets this kind of shepherdess hermit out at the edge of town, who then starts kind of telling her things, and then she starts bringing it home, and then that was my idea, as kind of like a catalyst to bring her into the picture.
It kind of makes me think. My brain kind of thinks about the fact that like when the Israelites, before they were the Israelites, when they were just like, you know, the 12 sons, when they came to Egypt, they became shepherds because the Egyptians like thought that like sheep were dirty, right? So they like basically went in to fulfill this really niche things that the Egyptians didn't want to have anything to do with. And I just thought of that because you said she was like a shepherd, and I just have this idea that somehow there's a certain thing that the pantheon just consider kind of abhorrent and not really. It could be something as simple as sleeping out under the stars. No, it has to be something else. Something that basically after Thomas meets Deborah, he kind of fills the city with and makes it seem really kind of happenstance. Like they grow lavender everywhere now, you know, and it irritates the pantheon. And so they just like, he basically starts to turn his city into an anti-pantheon place to make it not difficult for them to go, because they can still go. It's not like it stops them, but it's just more annoying as he himself slowly begins to become more and more vocal about what he is thinking. You know what I mean? I just had that thought that a bunch of different things just crossed in my brain and said, here's an interesting thought. So
I'm interested in developing this, as he continues to make progress on the suit made out of this dense material. That does this have an effect on him? Like, does he, you know, I mean, he can hide from the gods. In other words, they aren't able to tell what he's up to.
Right.
But does this bring some enlightenment to him as well?
What do you mean bring some enlightenment?
Well, like, yeah, like I have this picture of, you know, he's got the helmet, right? And there's because of the nature of this material, there's an interface to his you know, to his thinking and the way he processes information, and he becomes more attuned to sort of the elemental frequency of creation, so to speak. And
does it turn him into superpowered? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying is that it starts to awaken in him this realization, well, that maybe these powers really are real and not just some sort of hocus pocus, you know, that the gods are depending on.
Well, I don't think that he believes that they're not real. I just think he doesn't believe that the gods are necessarily the creators of the world.
Right.
You know, like these are the gods that he in his life have seen like throw fits and like kill hundreds of people.
Right.
And he's like, you're telling me that guy like created the world?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How about not?
Yeah.
How about actually no, that's not true.
Right.
I like the idea that the more he gets into this, that he becomes more sort of in tune with like, we don't like, it's kind of what Seth was saying, what the end result would be. Like, we don't need to rely on shipping off hundreds of pounds of gold, right? And like gallons of casks of wine in order to get like the priest to come and call rain down.
Right.
Because it does rain. Like if we just kind of like figure out when it's going to rain, we can literally just plan our year around when it's going to rain. And then we don't need the guy to come and call for it, you know?
Yeah.
I have this kind of idea though that like between the huge furnaces and the huge forgers, you know, refining down this material, and the budding lavender, because I'm deciding it's lavender, trade, where now lavender is kind of cooked and essenced at all hours of the day in order to off-put the smell of these furnaces. This kind of cloud comes up from the city and surrounds the city, and in it, no pantheon can view through or look into at what they're doing.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Right.
So I think that's the thing, that lavender itself, I think is, I think a way to put it would be, lavender itself is very important to them, and lavender is grown all over the place. But like no one ever thought of like cooking it down, because it was always like say all the priests always had, let's say, lavender on their, you know, staff, and you know, as if it was like this holy vestment. And so it was always like the idea of, and maybe it's actually like a potted thing, like they have a staff with like a small, almost like a wizard's
Plant.
staff, but like with an actual potted plant. It's actually planted, never cut. Like it was this highly revered thing. Because that is one thing that one of the was a rabbi that was. What's that?
I have a really good idea.
What's that?
It's a drug.
It's a drug.
Yeah.
So what?
Basically, it's lavender is a drug for the pantheon, right? And therefore they encourage its growth everywhere, but they don't encourage you to burn it or to do anything except for harvest it. Because literally, if you burn it too much, they'll go into like a comatose state, right? They'll just like go into comatose.
So it's like an incense thing that gives them power, but too much of it and they'll
they just like go to sleep basically. So that's why culture and has like this idea about burning incense to the gods, right? And then it's like a double-edged sword where it's like some cultures talk about evil gods but they still burn incense to him, except they burn more of it. You know, some cultures lay the lavender at the foot of the gods' temples, and some cultures burn tons of incense. They're this lavender, they're constantly burning it. And you're like, what's going on? Why are they burning it? Why are they burning so much? And then it's because there's literally where they have these temples where they're constantly burning this lavender, there are comatose gods in the temples. And if they stop, then they'll wake up. And so that's happened in like other parts of the world, where in this part of the world, Thomas is trying to figure out, you know, what's going on. But it seems to be that if he burns this incense, then it sort of keeps them away, you know, but they can't like tell you don't burn it, because then it's like, well, there's clearly something that gods don't want to happen, and that will keep them away when you burn it, you know, but they do want it. So you do have to grow it and you do have to bring it to them. You just can't burn it, any of it, near them, because it like just a little bit just like makes their head, you know, light, and they start to like lose the ability to decide. And then, you know, it's like if you were to get the equivalent of like when you're sitting around a campfire and the smoke blows in your face, that amount, they'd be like asleep for a day, you know.
Of it kind of heightens their power.
Yeah, heightens their power, or just gets them high. Like, you know, they're selfish gods. Like they're selfish pantheonic, you know, immortal. They're just like yeah. And so somehow Thomas has found out this, you know, who knows, maybe Deborah brought him a strain of this lavender from the mountains, and now they burn it every day in order to stave off the smell of the smiths. But the smell of the smiths, right, and the smoke going up filled with this chemical that repels the gods, and the smell and the lavender going up, it kind of it creates this protective shield where the pantheon won't go to the city, you know, to bring down retribution, but they also won't go to the city because they also won't sneak into the city, because there's so much of this that they would just like, you know, pass out basically. What do you guys think of that idea? Not too impressed, Reed?
Well, it's cool because it creates this, you know. So I like it. It's that, but the thing that I still haven't quite got straight in my mind is what do they want the shall we say the uncracked version of the cocaine, you know, or whatever, the unburned, that they just require lavender as a part of the ritual of offering to the gods, right?
Yeah.
What do they use it for? Do they use it process it a different way, or
to get high?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they use it to maybe they process it a different way, or maybe they just, there's a lot of them, or they don't mind being comatose when they're like up in their Mount Olympus style houses.
As the old heroin addicts would say, they're on the nod.
Yeah, which then further kind of infantiles them into just like basically a bunch of drug addicts with like a gun, you know? It's like, yeah, they're more powerful than us, but they're just basically a bunch of addicts, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we're like halfway through this story so far, right? Thomas has separated himself from Artemis, you know? He has created industry in this town in an effort to hide the fact that he is creating this armor, and Deborah has now partnered with him because she kind of has realized what he's doing, and maybe she sort of convinces him that she knows what's going on by like giving him like a knife or showing him like a hair needle, you know, made out of this same material.
Okay.
You know, and so they partner together, and through various forms of covert operations, they create this kind of haven while still trying to kind of make it seem like everything's fine and normal. They, are trying to create this subterfuge as they try to figure out what their next plan is. What do you think, Seth? Is that good enough to stop, or should we keep going?
I don't know. What do you think, Reed? Do you think it needs one more?
No, I think it needs one more. I'm just saying for today. It definitely needs one more. We don't have a resolution, really.
That gets us about halfway through. Yeah, that's
great.
Good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of Children of the Gods, a 10 or 20 part system. No, probably going to be less than that, but a couple part system where we try to make a fun story. If you like this format that we're doing instead of the one-offs, just let me know at Waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can at me on Twitter at Twitter at @getsbettercast. Otherwise, you can, write me a letter, write it out, put it in an envelope, and then take a picture of it and then send it to me at Waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you have any questions or comments, if you have any better ideas for how we could write the story, if you think maybe you do a better job at it than we would, I would say just wait, because it gets better.